Let me ask you something. What does it mean to defend your country? Not just with words, not just with diplomacy, but with actual action, with readiness, with power. Canada just made a decision that could redefine our role on the global stage. And most Canadians have no idea what just happened. I'm not here to talk at a crowd today. I'm talking to you. Maybe you are a lifelong Canadian, or maybe you are a new immigrant, or maybe you just care about where this country is heading. Either way, I promise you this. What happened on June 9th this year is one of the biggest shifts in Canadian defense policy in decades. And it directly affects you, whether you live in Mississauga or Moose Jaw. Today's video is all about Canada's dramatic move to finally hit NATO's 2% spending target.
I'm announcing today that Canada will achieve NATO's 2% of GDP target this year, half a decade ahead of schedule.
But this is not just about numbers. It's about why this is happening 5 years too early. What's broken inside our military that you probably don't see? A secret pivot away from the US. And the multi-billion-dollar transformation happening right now in shipyards, Arctic patrol stations, and military labs across this country. Stick with me, because by the end, you will see why this is more than a defense story. It's a Canadian identity story. And I will ask you a question at the end that I've been wrestling with myself. Canada hit 2% of GDP. Why now? Let's set the scene. It's June 9th, 2025. Carney walks on stage at the University of Toronto. The crowd's expecting a speech about economic policy. Instead, he drops a bombshell. Canada will achieve NATO's 2% spending target this year, 5 years ahead of schedule. That's not just a milestone. That's a shift in Canadian posture we haven't seen in decades. Remember, Canada co-founded NATO in 1949, but for most of the 21st century, we have hovered around 1.2 to 1.4% of GDP on defense, well below the 2% target. Now, certainly, boom, we are there. Why? Let me tell you, it wasn't the pressure from NATO, it wasn't even American pushback. It was about reality, a changing world, real threats, and yes, some deep national embarrassments.
Threats from a more dangerous and divided world are unraveling the rules-based international order.
Because while Canada's military is full of brave, brilliant people, the tools we have given them, frankly, many are falling apart. Before we go any further, please like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Subscribing to my channel is not going to cost you anything, but it's going to help me big time. Thank you. Now back to our topic. The military reality no one talks about. You know what does not make headlines? Rusty submarines. But they should. Let's break it down. Canada has 4 Victoria-class submarines. Right now, only one of them is fully operational. The rest are in dry dock, undergoing endless repairs. One hasn't been fully seaworthy since 2017. In the Arctic, one of the most strategically important regions on Earth, we are essentially blind underwater. That's just the beginning. Our CF-18 fighter jets, first built in the 1980s. They were supposed to retire years ago, but because procurement delays dragged on, we kept pushing them up like an old car you can't afford to replace. We are Canada, for God's sake. And it gets worse. Canadian soldiers in active training have reported radios that cut out mid-operation, trucks that stalled during snow exercises, gear so outdated that newer NATO allies have offered to help. This is not about pride, it's about safety. Imagine being a Canadian pilot told to intercept an unidentified aircraft over the Arctic and realizing your radar is 10 years behind the Russian model. That's not just outdated, that's dangerous. And the worst part, we were becoming known, quietly, diplomatically, as a NATO member that meant well, but was not reliable. That's what June 9th was about. It was not just about NATO. It was about fixing our own house. Spending breakdown. Where is the $9 billion going? So, how does Canada jump from 1.4 to 2% of GDP in 1 year? It's not just some accounting trick. It's real money, over $9 billion more in the 2025-2026 fiscal year. And here where it's going. Personnel and recruitment, $2.6 billion. Raises for active duty troops. Incentives for recruitment, mental health support program. Repairing what's broken, $844 million. Fixing grounded aircraft, refitting broken vehicles. Upgrading software in comms system. New equipment and tech, $1 billion. Surveillance drone for Arctic patrols. Quantum radar tech. AI-powered threat detection. Industrial boost, $2.1 billion. Shipbuilding contracts in Halifax, Vancouver. Defense research funding for Canadian universities. Support for small to mid defense companies. And that's just the initial phase. The goal, not just to meet NATO benchmarks, but to make sure that the next time a Canadian sub dives, or a patrol heads north, or a training op starts up in Saskatchewan, everything works, everything is safe, everything is ours. Part 3. Breaking free from US dependence. Let me ask you a question. What happens when 75% of your military equipment comes from one country? That's been Canada's reality for decades. The United States was not just our largest supplier, it was our only supplier for many systems. And when the US says jump, well, often we didn't get to say no. Carney called this out directly. He said, "We are over-reliant on a single foreign supplier. That's not resilience, that's risk." And he's right. We have seen it already. When F-35 procurement delays hit in 2016, Canadian pilots were left flying outdated CF-18s, well past their life cycle. Spare parts became a nightmare. Maintenance costs soared. And even now, many of our current contracts are entangled in US politics. If Washington changes its mind, we are left hanging. So here is the pivot. Canada is now shifting towards European and domestic suppliers. Advanced radar tech from Spain, drones from Sweden, Italian and German shipyards offering design partnerships, and more contracts staying right here in Canadian hands. This is not just about money. This is about sovereignty. Because if your defense is built abroad, how much control do you really have? Carney even said the quiet part out loud. We want a Canadian forces that is prepared and sovereign, not dependent and delayed. That's not just a procurement strategy. That's a strategic shift. Part 4, global reaction and realignment. Let's zoom out. When this announcement hit international news, NATO leaders noticed. And they are not used to seeing Canada take this kind of lead. Because while many allies were inching towards 2%, Canada jumped. Here is what that means geopolitically. NATO's Arctic strategies just got a boost, with Canada at the center. Joint Arctic exercises will now involve Canadian-led patrols, not just follow the leader drills with US or Norwegian command. In Ukraine's support, Canada's increased budget allows for more equipment donations and potentially more training roles on the ground. This realignment also sends a quiet but powerful message to Russia and China. Russia has been pushing into Arctic waters aggressively.
We've been jolted awake by new threats to our security and sovereignty, including from an emboldened Russia and an assertive China.
In 2023 alone, Russian military aircrafts flew over contested zones near Nunavut 12 times, and China is building research stations near the North Pole while deploying icebreakers that are fully armed. These are not coincidences. They are moves on a chessboard. And Canada just put a rook in place. This is a signal, not just that we are watching, but that we are ready. Let me bring this back to you for a second. Ask yourself, if your hometown was under threat, would we have the tools to respond in time? If Arctic shipping routes were blocked, how would our economy survive? If another global conflict broke out, would Canada show up ready? This is not about fear, it's about readiness. Because we don't get to pick when emergencies happen, but we do get to choose how prepared we are. Part 5. Domestic impact, jobs, innovation, and oversight. This $9 billion shift does not just affect the military. It affects you, your province, your city, Let's talk domestic ripple effect. In Halifax, shipyards are hiring hundreds more workers. In Edmonton, engineering firms are getting defense contracts for Arctic infrastructure. In Waterloo, cybersecurity students are interning with national defense labs. In Quebec, local manufacturers are producing parts for military vehicles. This is the largest domestic defense industrial boost in Canada since the 1950s. It is also an opportunity for innovation. Quantum radar. That's not science fiction. Canada is one of the global leaders, and this funding ensures it stays that way. But, and this is important, we also need oversight. Carney promised regular reports to Parliament and full access for the Auditor General. Because if we are spending this kind of money, Canadians deserve transparency. This can't just be another bureaucratic budget. This has to work. Let's step back. This is not just a policy change. This is a national moment. For the first time in decades, Canada is not just reacting. We are setting the pace. We are saying no to outdated equipment, no to dependency, yes to Arctic sovereignty, yes to defense that actually defends. This is about how we see ourselves as a country. Are we a quiet neighbor who waits to be told what to do? Or are we a nation that leads, prepares, and protects what's ours? Because here is the truth. A country that cannot defend itself is not free. And a free country does not wait for permission to be strong. So, now it's your turn. Do you believe this was the right move for Canada? Do you think we should go further beyond 2% like some NATO allies are planning? Do you want to see this funding go to local jobs and sustainable innovation? Let me know in the comments below. And if this episode made you think even just a little, share it with a friend, a parent, someone who still thinks defense is just for the US. Canada is turning a corner. Let's make sure we stay on the right road. And if you want more breakdowns like this, deep dives, real talk, Canadian contacts, please subscribe. I've got more coming that you won't want to miss. Because you deserve to know what's really happening in your country. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.